Okay, welcome back to Smart Irrigation. This is part 2. In the first part we introduced Smart Irrigation, what it does and how to set it up and install it. Now we're going to look at configuration. So to get started, we're going to look at the Smart Irrigation panel. Over here you'll set up the settings for your Smart Irrigation. You spend quite a few moments in here to set up all the stuff. So we're going to look at general first and then zones, and in other videos we'll cover modules and sensor groups. So in general, you will have a couple settings. The one is automatic weather data updates. So this is basically triggering all sensor groups to collect data from the weather station, for example, or your weather service or open weather map, or a combination of those at that moment. So I recommend leaving this on. You can absolutely also turn it off, and then you call the service to the services that we provide to collect the weather data. But by default it's on, and it's doing that every hour. So every hour all the sensor groups go out and collect the weather data from whatever they have been set up to do and store it for later calculation. Now, for example, if you use a weather station, sometimes that weather station is not providing values until after a couple minutes, after a Home Assistant reboot, I'm sorry. So you can then set up a update delay to tell us, hey, I want to wait an X number of seconds after a Home Assistant reboot before I collect the first weather data information. So next up, automatic duration calculation. This basically means we can configure when you want to take all that collected weather data to calculate actual durations for each zone. Again, you can disable it, then you have to manually call the service to have this happen. By default, it's enabled and it starts at 11 p.m. or 2300 hours. So that then happens and takes all the weather data for all the sensor groups that was collected through the day, and then calculates the duration for that day and updates the bucket, hence also calculates the duration that you want to have to irrigate for each zone. And the last option here is weather data pruning. Again, enabled by default. You can disable it, you can call the service to do it on your own. It is default set to 1 minute before midnight. So this is useful in case your weather station or your weather service, the sensor group might just collect information more often, even if, for example, your calculation has already happened. And to make sure you don't take into account weather data from yesterday or from today still in the calculation for tomorrow, you want to maybe do some pruning. So by default, we're going to prune automatically 1 minute before midnight. Now keep in mind, if the calculation is successful, we'll remove the weather data to be used for that calculation. But sometimes if you have it to set, for example, every 15 minutes, and you calculate at 11 p.m. so 2300 hours, you would actually want to remove that last straddling data points, because that is really for the day and not for tomorrow, right? So otherwise you might get weird weather patterns when you, for example, have a wet day after a dry day. So all that good stuff. Okay, so now on to zones. So I can have multiple zones. I can just add a zone, so my zone. I can set up a size in square meters or square feet, and then a throughput. A throughput is how much water do you push through the irrigation in that zone per minute, so in liters or gallons per minute. So look that up in your configuration of your irrigation system. So let's say, I don't know, it's 10 liters per minute, and I'm gonna add the zone. So now if you go look at my zone, we can see that it wasn't calculated yet, it wasn't updated yet. So we can change anything about the size and the throughput over here. And then there's a whole bunch of interesting settings down here. So first of all, important to note is state. So by default, a zone is in automatic, which basically means it is being calculated. The weather data for this is being collected and used to calculate the duration. So the bucket is automatically managed, and therefore the duration in seconds is also automatically managed. If you didn't want that, you can disable a zone, which basically means I'm going to set the duration to 0 and will never be updated. You can also specify manual, which allows you to specify a specific duration and keep it like that. So it's never going to be recalculated. This is useful in case you want to temporarily disable or tweak the settings. And then for each zone, you can specify which module you want to use. So there's multiple modules out here that you can use. For example, you can use Paido, static, and pass-through. This decides what calculation you run on what data to decide how to change the bucket. We'll cover modules in a subsequent video. Sensor groups are the place that collect the data. So here's where you wire up which sensors have what input. and that information is then fed into the module for each zone. Again, sensor groups we'll cover in the next video as well. And then each of these together change the bucket value. A bucket obviously starts empty, and then once more moisture gets subtracted from the soil because it hasn't rained, you will see the bucket dropping below zero. That's a sign you need to irrigate. So then you'll also see the duration above zero. Now you can specify a maximum bucket. So in case you hit a certain level, you always wanna irrigate, or you're worried that your bucket might drop too low and you irrigate too long. You can do that, as well as a lead time, which allows you to set up number of seconds to add to the duration. So this is useful in case, for example, once you open a valve, your pressure is not right there. You maybe want to add some 15-minute lead time, 15 seconds, sorry, lead time that basically says, hey, that's 15 seconds before my sprinklers actually start running because of the pressure. So that then gets added to the total duration. And then a maximum duration allows you to specify a maximum cap on the duration in seconds, so you don't run the risk of your sprinklers running for hours in case something went wrong. Multiplier allows you to have a decimal number in here, so to multiply the duration with. So if you wanted to change the value, you can change that. By default it's set to 1, and then duration is automatically calculated in the automatic state, but if you set it to manual, you can enter it yourself, which is basically the result of the bucket and the knowledge about size and throughput coming together into an actual duration. Now you can collect the weather data for each zone in here using the update. You can force it to calculate, or you can reset the bucket to 0, or you can delete a zone, right? Obviously don't do that too much because you have to set it back up. So over here I can just say, for example, here I have another one that has been collecting data for a while now, 299 points of data that we have, so 299 weather data collections, last updated this time, last calculated a little while ago. So I can change anything about here and then say, maybe I wanna calculate. And if I do that, I will actually see a new icon appearing. So now I see it was just calculated, so this was now just updated. The number of data points is now 0, so we used all the data, all the almost 300 entry points that we had there. We're now used it to calculate, and we see that the bucket is really high, so it basically means it rained a lot. So there's no irrigation necessary. Now if I wanted to learn more about how this happened, I can click on this little eye icon and then see exactly what happened here. So the module, so our PyEther module, returned an evapotranspiration efficiency of almost 60, which is huge, but that's because the number of data points was so high. So the bucket already was 9.2, so now the maximum bucket size is 200. So our new bucket is going to be 9.2 plus 57.8 is 66.9. Since the bucket is above 0, no irrigation is necessary, hence the duration is set to 0. If my bucket was below 0, we would then take the duration plus the lead time and then change it by the multiplier if it's not 1, and that would then be your actual duration. So you will have the explanation right here. So in case you're wondering what's going on and how we arrive at the value, this is exactly where you can look at. Okay, so that wraps up this video for now. We're going to look at modules and sensor groups in the next video.